Welcome back to Automation Airwaves. I'm your host, Scott Teeple, and welcome back to the show, Lee Coulter. Very excited to bring you the Global AI Market Report 2018 H2, where we're exploring the stall points. And this episode is Procuring with a Limited View. Very exciting, very exciting.
It is very exciting.
Procuring. So as always, we really like to just start, and let's define for the viewers of what we mean by procuring with a limited view. Yeah.
So this is a thing that is altogether new, and not to put too fine a point on it, but the IEEE 11 times in its 110-year history has issued an award for emerging technology, and the space of intelligent automation received that award. And why is that important? Because it is literally a different thing. I'm not going to overuse my box of possibility reference here, but there's nothing in the box of software that produces any business benefit. Well, how do you establish a value ratio? So the limited view is looking at the automation platforms as you would look at a commodity, or even as you would look at a piece of business software. It's neither. It is a box of possibility. And so when you've got 3 hammers on your belt, everything's a nail.
Yeah, right.
When you've got 14 different kinds of screwdrivers, whether it's a Torx or a Phillip head or a flathead, right, it's a screw.
Right, right.
And so for most organizations, when they're confronted with this reality, it's a reflexive reaction. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, we'll put this into the procurement pipeline, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of organizations, they have a separate technology procurement group than typical procurement, whether it's for direct or indirect material, because it is a specialty space. So the limited view is looking at it as though it resembles anything that has been purchased before. And when I say that, a couple of people have reminded me that database software is in a similar situation. It actually provides no value until you put it to work. So in that case, maybe it's not the only thing ever that is simply has potential to provide enterprise value, but that's really what it is. Procuring with a limited view is not being able to see that it is completely different and needs to be treated differently.
I do enjoy the database analogy or the challenge around that, but how many times have you installed a database and just left it and just put a table out there and just did nothing with it at all, right?
Exactly.
It's
right.
always bundled up in some kind of capability, some kind of product, something.
Fair.
Where automation, you literally are just putting it in place, putting your automation in.
And you haven't done anything with it.
I haven't really done anything with it. So if I'm looking at that from a procurement perspective, I start looking at, okay, when are you going to give me return on this investment, right? When are you going to possibly get me all of that? And that.
Well, and what's the typical first step, right? In buying anything, particularly technology, is bring me a business case.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that's weird in this case, right? Because there is no business case for the platform by itself. And a lot of mistakes are made through this process. So if it's treated as a traditional IT procurement exercise, then the business's knee-jerk reaction is to go in search of a single use case which, when automated, will justify the ROI of the whole thing. And I can tell you from personal experience, and certainly from talking to a lot of folks, that's almost a certain recipe for disaster.
Yeah, so as we think through that, and that's great, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, because I think that it goes into, right, that how to identify the problem or the cause, or that I'm either in it or I'm entering into that I've come into procuring with a limited view, right? At this moment, I find myself in my automation program thinking, oh man, am I in this situation right now? How would they identify that they are truly in this?
Well, fantastic question. Like, what's the diagnostic test, right? Am I procuring with a limited view? Yeah. So the first question is, look at your business case. And are you being required to bring a business case in the traditional sense? So if I use a piece of automation platform software, I can automate one thing, 10 things, 100 things, 1,000 things. And not to be like ridiculous, but the return on investment can be nearly infinite. It really can be many multiples, orders of magnitude more than the cost if you put it to work. And I use this analogy of the business person bringing a briefcase of easily addressable use cases. These are things that 80% of the transactions or requests or whatever it might be go through a straight through processing path, and that at least half of what remains goes through a single exception path. That's what you want to look for, and you want a bunch of those, even if they're not giant, right? They're worth 2,000 hours returned to the business each. Fantastic. These are choice nuggets, and so you really probably only need 4 or 5 of those in order to satisfy the business case requirements for a reasonable payback. But the limited view part is getting whoever's doing the procuring to understand that this is a business program, it is a business process transformation engine, and it is not a finite and fixed thing that will have a fixed value. The more you use it, the more value that you'll get out of it. And so that's like one part of procuring with a limited view. The same thing, or an adjacent thing, is this thing, you know, IT smells something like, I smell some ones and zeros. And it leads them...
Technology.
Yeah, must be technology, and therefore I know how to do this. And you know, one of the screwdrivers comes out, and you try to attack it, and it's not a screw. And so IT gets involved in the procurement process and begins to bring a traditional IT perspective to the value of the purchase. So how does that typically work? Well, process mapping is done on a single thing, right? So if I was purchasing claims administration software, I would look at all of the things that were done by human people that once the software is installed are now done in the straight-through processing of that piece of business software that has business logic encoded in it. Well, gee whiz beeve, doesn't work that way here, because the box of possibility doesn't have any logic coded in it, and the business is the one that on a continual basis needs to bring those things. So IT's their templates that they start with, their approaches, the way their BAs think, all of that has got a limited view. And I chose the word limited very intentionally because it's not unpredictable.
Yeah.
And it's not indicting anyone. It's just a limited view. You know, I'm ignorant of what the Marianas Trench is like, right? I have a limited view of what happens 30,000 feet under the sea. It doesn't make me good or bad or stupid or smart. It's just I haven't seen that. I don't know that. So it's a limited view I have on that. And so, and the third and most important leg of this is the business sponsorship. And here again, limited view. Does the business understand that this is not a thing that we're going to do? This isn't like an initiative. We're going to do it for a year. We will call it done. We will have received the value, and we will move on. Well, no, that's not the way this stuff works, right? This stuff works when you fill a funnel, a giant funnel of endless use cases that automation grade business analysts, and this is really important, automation grade BAs have been sanction to go look at those processes, identify the good candidates, and then go ahead and qualify what is the build cost and what is the run benefit. And choosing great business cases. I remember telling somebody, this is years ago, in our shop, for many years, we would, on our digital signage throughout the shop, would publicize when automation went into production. And I remember coming in one day, and there was a piece of automation that had just gone into production, and the business case was $2,040 a year saved. And that automation took one of the configurers about 6 hours to code. So people look at that as, oh, it's two grand, right, for 6 hours work. And it's having, even if they're that small, but they take you 6 hours to build, have a giant funnel of those things, and that's the role of the business. Yeah. In the same way that you wouldn't hire IT people or BAs to do claims administration, right. It's the same thing here. It's up to the business and the operation to do the use case identification. And as it pertains to procurement, needs to be an active dialogue so that everyone understands that this is a different thing.
Yeah, I liked where you were headed in this idea that within our typical procurement process, not specifically within the procurement department, but the process itself, that it's an initiative to replace. Mm-hmm. I'm looking to take something out of the machine and replace it with something else, which is kind of traditional. Yep. And we know that this is not a rip and replace. This is an augment. This is an enhancement to the overall process that really drives a different way of doing things. And if we're always looking at bringing them in the exact same way, we're really going to set ourselves up.
Yeah, I've heard a couple of interesting ways of thinking about automation as an assistant to the human labor, and the assistant is there to do the grunt work and the tedious labor, and leave people open to pursue the 3 C's, which we've talked about before. And in the same way, another great reference, often technology is purchased, so you look at what your run and maintain cost is. Yeah. What is your application maintenance cost for this thing across some lifespan, and do I get some new features and functionality out of it? Again, not the game we're playing here. This is a business program, a business that has made a decision to change the way they run. And this isn't a thing, there's a huge, very strong analogy to the Six Sigma and the CI transformation of the 90s and double aughts. And those who thought that you did a Six Sigma thing for a year and you were done, those programs failed. Right. For those that recognize that continuous improvement is continuous, then it became ingrained into their culture, and it became a way that they do all of the things that they do. And that there's so many parallels to those programs and these programs. And the technology, and for technology manufacturers out there, I don't want to minimize this, but for the purposes of our conversation today, the value of an automation program, the software is the easy part. The software is the easy part. This, as we're describing, procuring with a limited view, to get people to understand that this is a completely different thing, that's a leadership exercise. Yeah. That's collaboration and communication and influence and education and awareness. And so procuring with a limited view, as I've talked, some stall points are lethal, some are critical, some are merely a stall point that will stall your program for some period of time. And this is one that I would say it's a medium lethal stall point. Here's why. Some organizations, consulting firms, will, in order to satisfy the existing requirements that IT and procurement have, they will go find one big, gnarly, hairy, 163-step process that has 25 different exception paths, and they're going to spend
34 integrations.
Right. Exactly, right? You're going to spend 9 months building the thing, and you're going to put it into production. You're going to realize, oh wow, only 2 of the 25 exception paths are working, because A, we didn't really understand how it worked, and B, everybody who did the work did it differently. And for those programs, it's not lethal, but it can literally be an 18 to 24 month stall.
Yeah, and if we're really tackling it the way that you just described it, right, it's likely that we're missing all the other stall points, which is really going to set you up for success if you were going to tackle a very large, gnarly use case, right? Like having IT engaged in the right places, right? All of the things we talked about just the last time, lack of automation strategy and being able to clear the way. If none of that is done and you're tackling the most gnarly and the biggest one, you're going to hit all stall points all at the same time, right?
Yeah, well, certainly there's a lot of interrelationships here. Having a strategy will allow you to become aware of a lot of the stall points, as we talked about in our last session. But some of these stall points are logically likely to occur before the development of a strategy. So the right relationship with IT, the procuring with a limited view, both of these can occur well before it is reasonable to expect you've actually developed a strategy.
Absolutely.
So some of these, and these are where I'm going to be gentle here, where folks have put their trust in the wrong groups of people to advise them through this process, and they end up, because the time hasn't been taken to build alignment with procurement and with legal and with the business and with IT, that we're just going to create this gnarly use case to satisfy procurement so we can get the software in the door, and then we're going to build it, and then we're going to walk away. And then the business is left with no funnel of use cases, no experience of building the coalition necessary to re-implement the transformed work to deliver the benefit, and so on and so forth. Right? It's a never-ending tale.
It is absolutely a Lego just keeps knocking itself down as you
domino.
Domino. So as we finish up here, what advice would you give the viewers and as we enter into or finish up this procuring with a limited view?
So I have 2 or 3 really specific pieces of guidance. One is the manufacturers have sold this stuff a bunch of times. So get them involved. If you're working with a channel partner, a reseller, consultant, no, get the manufacturer involved. The licensing and the eventual sale of the product between the 2 companies will be direct, generally speaking, to the manufacturer. Get them involved. Their people have been through this hundreds, if not thousands of times, and can educate procurement and IT. So that's one, is really understand that it is a different animal. 2, leverage people that actually know why it's different, what's different about it, and how it needs to be treated differently. So that's an advisor, and I continue to maintain there are too many ways for these things to go sideways to not have a competent advisor who's been there and done that. So an advisor who's done it a bunch of times, bring in the manufacturer, and make sure that the business is showing up with a briefcase of attainable use cases and a mechanism to keep the funnel full. That makes for a successful program. So that would be my advice.
Well, I really appreciate you coming in today, and as we finish up, please make sure that you're headed out to our website, Agilify.com, agilifyautomation.com, and take our assessment survey. A lot of great information and insights into your overall program to help you with the stall points that we talked today. Thank you.
Thanks.